So good afternoon to our colleagues, educator friends from the Middle East, from the Indian schools in Middle East, and good evening to the rest of us who are based in India. On behalf of the Teacher Foundation, a warm welcome. My name is Maya Menon, and this HeadsNet is part of our bi-monthly series of free webinars since May 2020. This is our 7th one, and we've been having these free webinar series ever since the pandemic hit us. It's part of TTF's endeavor to stay connected both personally and professionally with educators across India and Indian educators teaching in other parts of the world. Our focus is all, teachers teaching in Indian schools and Indian teachers. Our fervent wish for you is that all of you continue to give your personal well-being and professional development importance and attention it deserves. At present, there's a surfeit of webinars, and it becomes difficult to decide which one to attend at the end of a day's work particularly. So thank you for being here. One thing I want to say in strong support of TTF's webinars is that we try and stay clear of the rhetoric and focus on the specifics. The specifics about school leadership, the specifics about teaching approaches, specifics about teacher and student well-being, and today, the specifics about a far-reaching policy like our National Education Policy 2020. And I say far-reaching because it will be here with us at least for 25 years, because education policies don't change every 5 years or every 10 years. We had asked you to take a dipstick survey on NEP when you registered, and we had about 748 participants who completed that survey. I'd like to share some of the data from the survey right away, and so let me just do that. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so I hope you can see this. Yeah. So we asked a few questions, simple questions, but it was a very brief survey. Have you read the NEP 2020? Well, 371 out of the 748 people said, I'm still reading it. Thank you for your honesty. Some of you have said no. Thank you for that also. And a few, 311 people who've said yes, they have read it. At least you can read at least the school education part of it, because we're talking about school teachers, because there is a section for higher education, vocational education, professional education, etc. But you can just look at the school education part, which isn't very long. NEP, another question was on NEP has replaced the schooling structure from 10+2 to 5+3 +3+4. What are your views on this? And the majority of you said, I vote for, I vote for the 5+3 +3+4 structure. A few of you, 82 people from the 748 said, I prefer the 10+2 structure. Could we just mute everybody apart from just me? Yeah. The new structure won't bring much change. A few of you say it's still too early to say as yet. 35 people said that. And I'm not sure, 192, because we perhaps, very honestly, we don't know how it's going to pan out. So that was your response. Then let's look at the next one. The third question was the emphasis on the use of mother tongue, local language, regional language as the medium of instruction, at least till grade 5, but preferably till grade 8 and beyond. Out of the 748 responses, it was sort of evenly distributed. The blue says this will become an advantage since students have to focus on learning the concepts in the language they're comfortable with. So many of you felt that, 265 of you said that. The red is children will not be well versed in English, which is a global language, hence a setback from their peers in other countries. Of course, other countries, English is not the main language in other countries. It just so happens in some of the English-speaking world. And there is research that tells us that when children, especially in a large, diverse, complex country like India, learn in the language of the home, they're able to learn concepts, particularly in the early years, much faster. The yellow ones represents it will be difficult to implement due to diverse students in classroom. That is correct. someone will always be facing the disadvantage, especially in the cities, in big cities, because there are children with, coming from different backgrounds in different regions of the country. And so there could be multiple mother tongues and home languages. So it may be difficult, particularly in urban India, to implement it, but rural India would definitely benefit. Last comment with the fourth one. The minimum degree or qualification for teaching will be a 4-year integrated B.Ed degree. And these are your comments. 419 of you said the teachers need to be skilled with 21st century students' needs. This is a great initiative in that direction, the fact that you're having an integrated 4-year degree program. A sliver of people, 43 people, the red one, says one common B.Ed degree for all teachers who teach variety of subjects is not a great move. But it's not necessarily one common B.Ed degree, because the B.Ed does take into account that teachers could be majoring in different subjects. The yellow 186 responses. A separate B.Ed degree should not be mandatory to all. A specialization in a specific field can also encourage youth professionals in considering teaching. That's an interesting point of view, and I've often been an advocate for alternative routes to teaching. So thank you, 186 people. And the green stands for 100 people. There should be a defined curriculum for early childhood educators too. I think that's absolutely right. And talking about the foundational curriculum, and I think that is the intent of the new education policy. So with that, I'm going to stop share, because there were many other questions you asked also, and those I've saved up for our special guest speaker today, Meeta, to address. And I passed them on to Meeta, so the questions you posed will be addressed. And let me introduce you to Meeta. Our session is titled The Promise of New Education Policy, NEP 2020. And Meeta Sengupta works at the cusp of policy and practice across education and the skills spectrum. She has been an investment banker, a researcher, an editor, a teacher, and school leader across continents. She's been a keen observer of how economics, foreign policy, and investments affect the policy and therefore practice of education. She works with leaders to design interventions that improve the quality and process of education. Designing education processes to realize the potential of individual students is at the center of her education philosophy. Meeta is a fellow at the Salzburg Global Seminar and a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, and that's how she has the suffix FRSA attached to her name. Meeta is the founder of the Center for Education Strategy, a Delhi-based think tank that builds bridges between policy and practice for educators, educationists, and institutions. Meeta has an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, as well as a PGCE, that's the Postgraduate Certificate in Education, from the UK. She's a regular contributor to leading newspapers on matters concerning education. A collection of her writings on education can be accessed through EduVichar, www.eduvichar.wordpress.com, and on socioeconomics from meetasengupta.wordpress.com. In her spare time, Meeta likes to write short stories for children, poetry, and travel the world. She tweets. You can follow her on Twitter, those of you who are on Twitter, at Meeta Sengupta, and she can be reached at, she will tell you, she was going to, so. Meeta, we're really looking forward to listening to your talk. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such a lovely welcome. And thank you so much for having me here. This is such a beautiful gathering. And thank you very much for making the topic of this session such a safe topic, because you have spoken of the promise of the NEP. Now, if you'd asked me to speak of the practice of the NEP, life would have been much more difficult. The promises are much easier than practice. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today, literally going forward. So thank you very much for this. I do have a presentation, And I will try to share that and talk through this with everybody. But thank you
Yeah.
everybody for joining us here today. And for those of you who have read the NEP, the new education policy, you will find much that is familiar. Uh, and as you were reading the new education policy, one thing, there are only two possible reactions to the new education policy. One is you look at the grand vision of this policy and you realize how lofty it is, how beautiful it is, and you start floating in the clouds. And you feel absolutely wonderful about this new future that we can create for ourselves at school, and the new future that we can create for our students. Suddenly there is this beautiful, flexible, free world where each of them can reach their potential. And it's in our hands. We are the educators. We can make it happen. There's so much positivity in this. And the other reaction to the very same policy is absolute and utter despair. Because I have seen educators turn around, practitioners, teachers, head teachers, directors, principals turn around and say, but how? How will all of this happen? How does this make sense in the classroom? And that, in a sense, in a way, is the journey, is the early journey of this new education policy. It was announced in August 2020. And between August 2020 and now, and maybe a few more months here, our task really as educators is to interpret and to understand this new education policy and ask ourselves, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us in the classroom? What does it mean for us as people who are designing the future of education? Because ultimately, every educator, this future of education is not a new term. Every educator has always designed the future. We are in the business of designing the future. That is why we are called teachers. So 21st century skills or not, we have always been leading ahead. And this is, here comes this guidance of some guru people who came together, who worked with a lot of consultation and asked everybody the question for about 3 years, what is our dream? What is our vision? The vision part of it is done. The making vision reality part of it is now in our hands, which is why I'm going to start my screen sharing now. If you allow me a moment here. Which is why what I'm going to talk about, can you see the screen?
Yes, Meeta. Yes, that's fine.
Thank you for confirming that, yeah. Which is why we start with the promise. We start in the clouds, even in today's discussion. But as we start with the clouds, we also realize the despair, the gaps. And then we finally, the third part of today's 25 to 35, 40 minutes that we discussed this here before the Q&A. The third part of it is about coming down to earth and saying, what does it mean for us in the classroom and in our schools? So here is us, the classic scenery with 3 mountains to climb, the sun rising in the east, the opportunity and the hope that the new education policy brings us. So what does it bring us? One fundamental principle of this education policy is giving choice to students and to teachers. We've spoken, you've already in your introduction, Maya, you introduced the concept of the B.Ed. That was part of your question. Now, there isn't one single way of acquiring this B.Ed degree. There is of course, the 4-year B.Ed degree, but then you have the graduation and the certificate top-up. There are multiple choices. There are multiple ways. And we'll talk through some of the other types of choices over here. But the fundamental principle has been, let's give as much choice as we can to our students so that they can personally choose how to build a pathway to their own potential. The second thing that it has done is it's given chances. Chance after chance after chance. And that I think was absolutely essential because our system had become a little bit too regimented. If you made one choice, then you were stuck with that choice for a long time. if you happen to choose some physics and computer science in your class after your class 10, your graduation pretty much had to follow that line, or Delhi University would penalize you for it, and so on and so forth. So our systems had become a little bit too rigid. And this is why the philosophy of chance has been one of the important parts of this new education policy. But the most interesting one, I think, is the challenge. Because for once, the challenge is not on the establishment. For once, the challenge is not with the authorities. For once, they have thrown the gauntlet onto us and said, onto us educators, and said, here is a dream that we share. Now you tell us how to make it real. You tell us how we're going to make it real. Which is why it's a very tricky point in educational history in a way, where we sit, all of us educators and leaders today, because we are asking for guidance and they are asking us for methods. So this is the crossroads at which we must meet. This is the crossroads that we must navigate, that we use their guidance and we show them how. And then we go back and forth and we figure out ways of making it out. And this is where we get a chance, we get a choice to decide how. The how is not being forced down upon us for once. There will be guidance, there will be teacher training, there is a 15-year, 20-year plan, etc. But the opportunity lies with us right now to step up and, in fact, define a few things. And that's what we're going to talk to. Very quickly, as a catch up to those of you who have not read the policy, the new education policy rests on 5 pillars: access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. They have very clearly placed quality right in the center. Each time they write it, they always write it in with quality in the center, even if the order of other things changes. And at a policy level, those of us who are policy leaders know that there's a bit of a challenge in making that happen also. If you give access to everybody, those of us who have institutions and schools which give admission to everybody who comes in on a first come, first serve basis, we know in our classrooms that equity and managing the range of the classroom is always a little bit harder work. Those schools that have selective exams, etc., they know that the range of the classroom is almost the same. So managing equity in the classroom is so much easier for them. Again, affordability and accountability. Very tricky when you have very little, very tight budgets given to some schools, and then you ask the teachers to be accountable for very fantastic, and I'll deliberately use this poor grammar when I say very fantastic, because it highlights the challenge of quality in the classroom. Then you don't have the resources, you're accountable for results, and you have to demonstrate amazing quality standards. This is a bit of a challenge, but of course, when we dream, when we create a vision, we have to dream big. And even if we make it to some part of this, even if we make one step ahead every day, even if we have one step, I know somebody needs to mute themselves, I'm sure.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out in a second. But even if we make it one step better every day, with the compounding effect of one step better every day, we would have created a world that is halfway better than it is already. And that is the promise really of the NEP, saying try one step better every day. So I'm just going to explain the 4 M's. You know, mnemonics are very easy for us rote learning people, because if I remember the 4 M's the way I remembered my 7 ways to memorize the periodic table and whatnot, it's just easier. So here are 4 M's of the NEP 2020. 1, multiple chances. Very quickly, multiple chances have played out beautifully in terms of the class 10th, 12th exam, where they have promised and have begun to deliver on students being able to take the same exam again. If they have, like the SATs, for example, you can take the SATs again and again and again, and you use your best score. Now, that is the promise. In reality, what we have seen so far, even though this was a pandemic year, is it's not very different in practical terms from the exam you could take in any case and the supplementary exam you could take if you didn't have a good score. In practice, they haven't really done that, but I think the promise is definitely there, saying you should not, just because you have a bad day, just because the bus broke down that day, just because you had a family emergency that day and you could not take your exam well, that is no reason for ruining your life if your class 12 exam wasn't done really well. You should have another chance at taking the exam. This they have already started implementing in the IIT entrance exam, the JEE. They have started implementing this in the medical entrance exam as well, the concept of multiple chances. Multiple chances again in higher education. I know we focus more on schools, but our school children must know this, that when they go into higher education, they have a chance of dropping out for a very limited, for about a year or so, and they can still go back again. So those of us who have students in class 11 and 12, and I mentor a few young girls from vulnerable backgrounds personally, many of them turn around and say, but ma'am, my family will not let me do 3 years. Now we can tell them it's okay. Just do 1 year at least. You can drop out for a year and you will still be allowed to keep your grades and come back and do another year. You don't have to do it all together. There are more chances that are made available to you. Multiple choices, again, most of you would know by now. So very quickly, the streams have been abolished as such. So you can make different types of choices. You can have physics and dance if you want to, or gymnastics and chemistry as a combination if you want to, if your school can allow for that. Now, CBSE, of course, did previously also allow for this. So this is more a guidance to the other boards. And a signal to schools. This is a direct signal to schools saying that we understand that in practice it is very difficult to manage the costs and the timetables of offering all sorts of combinations. Practically, it is not very easy to offer all sorts of combinations. So can you try to bring more and more choices for your students? And what are the different ways in which you can bring multiple choices to your students? And now, after the pandemic, actually, we realize that we have more choices. The cluster approach, for example, that is recommended in the new education policy, we can interpret the cluster approach to think of shared services. So, for example, if one school has a great dance curriculum, maybe we can seek 1 day of their dance teacher's time and say, can we have a shared session with your school? If somebody has a great chemistry lab and we are unable to offer chemistry in our school because we don't have the space for a new chemistry lab or maybe the funds for a new chemistry lab, then maybe we can offer more choices by combining our efforts with another school. Especially now we know that some parts of the theory can be done online as well. Some parts of the theory, not all, of course. Sorry, somebody will have to mute themselves over here. So the guidance is here. Now that they have told us, for example, that we should bring in multiple choices into the school, the challenge is yours. In how many ways can you bring more choice to your students? Now, again, multidisciplinarity is absolutely amazing, both at middle school, where the approach is so much more flexible, saying the subjects don't necessarily matter the way they used to. That doesn't mean practically much changes. What it does mean is that it would be wonderful if you could embed some learning from other subjects into your own subject. Maybe you could have a once a week meeting for the year group where you can have a discussion about embedding some science stories into your English lesson if it fits in, about embedding some discussions about social structures into your chemistry lessons. I know one IIT chemistry professor, the one who leads the department in Delhi, is very fond of talking of chemistry and he thinks it's funny. He leads every year group with that. as the way human relationships work. So you could embed learning in different ways, but it doesn't make sense to do it randomly. It's not a joke. It has to be done in a planned manner, and embedded learning often creates a multiplicity effect or a chain learning effect. And there are theories that back up embedded learning in different ways. Embedded learning is, of course, part of our Panchatantra as well, where stories are embedded within other stories in order to improve retention of the principle of these stories. Again, memory and retention of the concept is improved when stories are embedded within other stories. So again, there is some literature and theory to back that up as well. And that is what they're saying. But what they're saying is, do it your way. Do it your way in your school in a way that works for the discipline of your school. They're not saying we impose it. They're saying we guide on it so far. And of course, the multiple pathways to getting to where you want to, so that your students can actually achieve their personal potential without being forced. So suppose a psychiatry student is very good, a psychology student is very good in mathematics. They don't have to be stuck in the art stream. And therefore, they can create an entire pathway with data sciences going ahead. And eventually, they may be assessing education outcomes for all of us and telling us how to improve our schools. So these are new pathways that did not exist when we were learning. It sounds very new to us, but I think it's also incumbent upon us to allow this flexibility. The line below here is basically the principle on which this is, that if we allow students the flexibility to be who they are, they will find their path. Because the rote learning way, and this is why I'm on the new slide, even though it looks the same, the rote learning way has not worked and does not work anymore. Anything that we could learn by rote can be done by a robot now. Anything even a doctor could learn by rote can be done by a diagnostic robot. Anything an accountant could learn by rote is already being done by a robot. Anything that a problem-solving consultant could do, or a lawyer could do by learning by rote, there are machines to do it all. So we are at this beautiful cusp of
You are not playing with the carom first pack that, huh?
Oh, please mute yourselves.
Yeah. Because we
Ma'am, you're muted.
Ma'am, you are muted, ma'am.
Yeah, Miss Mita, you're muted.
Sorry, Meeta.
yeah.
I think we missed a few things. Yeah.
No, you didn't. I realized I was muted. My screen
Okay.
popped up with "You're muted, you're muted,"
Okay. All right. Good.
which was actually a brilliant illustration of the man-machine interface we were just discussing, right?
That's true. Yes.
So because that's the change we're facing, right? That we are playing around with machines, not realizing the machine is going to take over some parts of it. And yet the man part of it is what we have to do. I had to unmute myself. I had to activate myself literally over here. And that is what we need to do for our students. We need to understand what is this activation part for our students. So how does the NEP do the lead in this one? And I think the NEP has been very sneaky in this particular way, because they don't have a proper section saying we are going to change the world by fixing the assessment angle. What they have done is they have recognized that till there is an exam, we are going to teach to the exam. Till there is a class 10 exam, till there is a class 12 exam, all our idealism is going to happily play out in the early years. We will still be idealistic in middle school, but come class 9, it's going to be, okay, board exams are coming, now it is time to get serious. So they said, okay, if you will keep on getting serious, we will tell you what to get serious about. We will change the nature of the question. You were getting serious about questions that were only testing for knowledge, that were only testing for photocopying ability. We will change the question. Now we will ask questions that are about application. So that's the top left square over there. Saying, if you have mere knowledge, if you have merely memorized the stuff and you haven't understood, you will not be able to do that. We as teachers now, even if we want to continue to teach to the test has changed. The test has now become one of ability, of competence, not of what you know, but what you can do with that knowledge. And this is a transition that is beginning this year. I'm told it's not going to show up in this year's board exams. Nothing changes in this board year's exams. So nobody needs to panic, because it will go through a process of rolling out by the CBSE. And by now we know the CBSE has a very reliable rolling out program. So they will do it properly with proper announcements, with proper teacher training, with proper head training, etc. But we will have to then after that train ourselves in the new way. So this is a 3 to 5 year rollout, but the nature of the question is going to change. Now, if the nature of the question is going to change in class 10 and 12, then it automatically changes for us not only after class 9, but it automatically in the middle school. We do not need to worry so much about preparing our students for when it becomes serious. We actually have a lot more freedom in recognizing the abilities of our batch, our cohort in front of us, and saying, this batch will do a little bit better if we are able to take them into the real world and solve these problems. Or this batch will do better if we use progressive learning methods. This other batch will do better if we go back to a little bit more traditional methods because their foundations seem to be weak. We know that in middle school, we have the capacity now to be a bit more responsive to the need. And this is where we as teachers get a little bit more, at least in the dream and the promise of the NEP, we get a little bit more accountability for how our students are able to grow up into their board exam years. Because we do not have to socialize them into rattabazi. We do not have to socialize them into practicing how to become photocopiers. Class 6, 7th, 8th often used to become, your speed matters, your drawing matters, all the building blocks of building towards the board exam. Now, those building blocks have to be slightly different, more application based. And of course, the same thing they have said in the first 5 years as well. Now, secondly, what also happens is the NAS, the class 3, 5, and 8 exams. Now, these are not going to be exams as such. There will be sampling that is done. That has already been in place for about 2 or 3 years, to be honest. A little bit more, maybe about 5 years on a pilot basis. Now, this is going to become normal, but they are not testing the student. When I say the exam in the top right quadrant, they are not testing the student. They're simply doing a dipstick test to see a sampling of the progress to see if the schools are doing well or not. And the feedback will be given across all schools so that we enter into a self-improvement cycle. This is not about pressure on the students at all. There is no pressure on the schools. Those schools, of course, have to go through an accreditation system going forward. We'll talk about that in a minute. What they have also done, very interestingly, because different boards, this is one of the questions that had come up earlier, different boards have different standards, right? CBSE seems to have the toughest standards. Other boards seem to give marks very freely. So you can't really compare the class 12 marks of one board to another board, and still you have to use it for university admissions. Your class 12 marks are basically your end goal, right, as a school. So what they have done is they have introduced another test, which is voluntary right now. At this stage, it is voluntary. And they are going to persuade schools and states to gently persuade them to take it on as an entrance test for higher education. No force at this stage, absolutely not. The exam itself has not been established. It's just probably just starting off right now. But very interestingly, if it is done well, what will happen is soon if a few hundred people, students, maybe 5,000 students from each state take the exam, we will soon have, and those of you who are maths and statistics teachers over here and science oriented, you will find this very interesting. We will soon have enough data to compare the various boards. So in answer to the direct question that came, no, the boards will not be integrated. Nobody wants to integrate boards. I am very much an advocate of having a new skills board. I'm an advocate of having a lifelong education board. New boards should be added. But these boards will not be integrated. But the attempt is to find valid marks and data so that we can at least understand how these boards stand in relation to each other based on direct evidence from student performance over there. And then we can calibrate the boards, then we can advise the boards, we can improve some boards, some good can be done out of that. So the third thing they've done is create this alternate exam, which I think is absolutely a very interesting fundamental and institutional step. It doesn't affect our daily lives, but it affects our understanding of what the boards are going to do in the next 5 years or so, 5 to 7 years or so. And finally, they have added the National Testing Agency, which is already running many of the exams, and the Parak, again, institutional backup so that we have some assessment research. So far in India, we have very good assessment administration, but very little understanding of what is a question. How do you make a better question? I'm not sure if any of you have been trained in what is the right, I mean, we know Socratic questioning, etc. from our B.Ed training. But Maya has been an absolute visionary in teacher training. So I know she has included a lot of these in her sessions, but other than TTF, I have heard of very few places where how to ask the right question in class is actually taught to teachers. There's a lot to be gained from different questioning techniques leading to different learning outcomes. And this is what is being done at a national level now. Not just at the NCERT, but a separate agency for assessment is going to be done so that the science of assessment is understood thoroughly. I'm sure we can have a separate session on that. We know the right people to ask. We know that. So the assessment is basically the tail that wags the dog so far. The exam has dictated how we teach. So they're changing the way the exam happens so that we are supported in being able to teach for something more than rote learning. This is our reason now, and this is our support system now. I seem to not be able to change my...
Okay, should I help?
I may need help.
Okay. This is the last slide, isn't it? Should I just do it?
Yeah, might as well. I think it's easier. For some reason, my screen is blocked after the unmuting.
Okay.
Which shouldn't happen.
It should not actually, but okay, I've just, sorry, there may be a slight difference in the thing. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're here and no, here.
And I should be able to claim it back in a few minutes. But
okay.
So finally, what we're saying is that because we are moving past rote, we have been asked to move up the value chain. And the value chain, again, this is in response to a direct question of the questions that all of you had put in earlier about mastery learning. We have now been asked to move from the marks and measurement level of teaching and learning via applications, which is the maker level. Either our students are trained and learn to deliver marks. One level above that is our students and are trained to deliver application, which means they become makers. Now the Atal labs, for example, the tinkering labs, the maker stations that are available in many, many schools, especially in international schools, centralized maker labs that are available across from universities where school children can go in and actually do some experiments. Now that is the intermediate stage. But we at the NAP have been charged with mastery. The question that was asked is, can every student attain mastery? I don't think that is what we have been what we will be held accountable for? Absolutely no. But if we are able to show excellence, show that spark of excellence to our students, even introduce them to some great masters of, we would have actually lit the spark where at some stage they will go and attain mastery. So the best of our students, of course, we will help them and guide them to mastery as much as we can. The ones that who struggle, maybe it's just too early for them, and we will recognize that. But if we can show them the path to mastery, at least that would have started them off. So I hope that answers the specific question on mastery. In terms of the NEP, of course, we are definitely being asked to climb up the value chain. I mean, for years, for example, we even though Indian school students products, if I can call them, have done incredibly well in computer science, for example, they have also been called code coolies. They have been asked to do the basic level work, even in the world of IT. I think it is time for many of them, and we see this in industry actually, for them to rise to higher levels in the value chain. And this is true not just for the IT industry, but everywhere else. And to lead them to mastery is our task, because we will have to show them excellence. We will have to showcase what mastery looks like. At the very least, our task is to showcase what mastery looks like. We will have very many techniques. Some of the Singapore learning techniques, for example, have been talking about mastery for the longest time. So I'm sure you will have training sessions on that. Sorry, can we move on? Thank you. Now to the disappointments. I said some of us will look at it in despair. What does the NEP miss out on? The NEP misses out on transitions. Very clearly, the NEP does not have anything that says, here is a child who is moving from middle school to high school. What choices should I make? How do I know whether I want physics or I want computer science? How do I know that dancing is good for me? Will I be able to score marks in psychology or history? I don't really want to sit for the UPSC, but history is a scoring subject, ma'am, sir. What do I do over here? Who is helping them with these transitions? We are, because there is no institutional mentoring mechanism. There is something like career guidance, there is something like counselors, but that has not really been part of the NEP. We have built it at schools. And the transitions are not well enough supported in the NEP. Let's acknowledge that. Again, discovery. How does a poor student sitting in a rural area discover that there is the perfect scholarship in Chennai waiting for them? There are no discovery mechanisms. The portals exist. Every state has their own portal. Now, somebody in a rural area, somebody from a disadvantaged thing, they are not research ready. In fact, nobody has taught them curation. There is no curation, in fact. That's the third block. How do they know how to research? It's only the best of the best schools that teach students research abilities and normally not in CBSE so far. Now the middle school curriculum should enable research and exploration, discovery. But so far that has not been part of our students' ability set. And finally, for anybody who is vulnerable, the inclusion funds are clearly not enough. Those of us who are from India and keep an eye on government schools and public education as such, we know that we are still at 2.5 to 3% of the GDP. We have been asking for 6%. We want double the money. We need double the money. Now, if we can't get double the money, we have to work smarter with the money that we have. And this is why for all of these, we need champions. If we move on, our first solution is that of champions. The other gaps are technology and the underprivileged. There are beautiful words in the NEP about technology. We talk about AI, we talk about devices, we talk about tracking students. I'm personally very, very scared of tracking students from the very beginning. Creating too much tracking means that students respond to being watched rather than building self-efficacy, self-discipline, autodidactic systems where they learn because they want to learn. They behave well because it's the right thing to do. Being watched is not the right solution. doing the right thing just because somebody is standing there with a stick is not the right thing to do. So again, too much technology, how we use technology, the ethics of technology, the ethics of engagement with students and young children who do not even understand their privacy rights at this stage, how you deal with that, I would have expected more guidance on that. This entire year of work from home, school lockdown has told us very clearly that digital pedagogies have not evolved. All of us in the beginning, we all tried to replicate the classroom and say we have to do a 40-minute session and we have to do exactly what we used to do in the classroom. We know that doesn't work. We know we have to chop and change like Lego bits and build a whole new structure of digital pedagogies. I wish there was more guidance on that, or at least a roadmap to that in the education policy. There are some organizations that they've said will look after it, but we're still waiting for them to, in fact, even meet for the second or third time. So it's very slow progress. I also would have liked to see so much more on lifelong learning. We have reached that stage where, say, for architects, for doctors, for computer science professionals, lifelong learning is a way of being. If you're a computer science professional, you are outdated in 2 to 3 years. This is true for every profession. All of lifelong learning is not about the have-beens and the left behinds only. It's not about community college is not only for the less able. There's a certain patronizing tone in the NEP for these. For lifelong learning, for community college, for homeschooling, for further education, for village education clusters. That patronizing tone is absolute, or even vocational learning. They've tried very hard to not have a patronizing tone for vocational learning, actually. But we don't need that, because even the best of us, even the smartest of us, the cleverest of us will do so much better if we have these options available to us all the time. Today, I want to work on education philosophy, and I realize that John Rawls' History of Justice is a debate that I need to get into. I can sign up for community college for that. As a teacher, I want to grow in this particular aspect. I should be able to do that. As a community college teacher, I used to have French professors coming in to learn business in my classroom. They were 70 years old. They were rebuilding themselves and starting new online businesses in teaching French. There are just so many things that we could never learn everything we needed to learn in the 25 years designated for learning. All of us need to renew ourselves. Our students need to have pathways to renew themselves. So again, these are things that these are the attitudes that we as educators can build, because then we will be building the demand for lifelong learning, and our students will go forth and actually ask it or even know how to learn. If we build in self-efficacy right now, we teach them how to learn right now. We teach them that learning is continuous and lifelong, and certification isn't necessarily an essential part of learning, but it's a good thing to have because it proves to others, outsiders, who don't know how much you have learned. If we can teach them this, I think we would have fulfilled our vision as leaders of this new optimistic new education policy. If we could do the other 2 slides very quickly, Maya. Thank you. So what is the roadmap? Some of you have already answered questions on the 5334, etc. So I won't go into detail over here, because we can do this in the Q&A as well. But the roadmap, thankfully, has been done very, very, very quickly. Back to the roadmap. It exists, is being built in the MHRD, and the roadmap documents are being shared in presentations by ministry officials from time to time. So assessments we have already talked about. You do know that the new National Professional Standards for Teachers will be out by 2022. We also know that the foundational learning is on mission mode, which means that's going to get funding definitely before anything else. And all ministries will have to cooperate in that. That means the job gets done. When it's in mission mode, that's a technical term for government officials. And finally, the school accreditation process and integrated pedagogies for the early years are things that we look forward to. There is again a roadmap for that till about 2035. Most things are being mapped, and I'm actually quite pleasantly, happily surprised to see how professional the roadmap process is so far. So those of you who have questions about that, do look up the MHRD presentations that are going out on this, because you will be able to find a specific presentation. The last one, slide please. Thank you. So finally, the how. How are we going to do it? We said we'll come back down to earth as well. And the coming back down to earth over here literally says, these are the 4 big asks from us. Really, I mean, if we parse through the 60 pages of very, very beautiful language and optimistic language, there are 4 or 5 things that we as teachers are expected to do in our classrooms, whether we are early years, middle years, or secondary and post-secondary learning. 1, we are expected to embed critical thinking. When I say critical thinking, I'm also talking about the other 5 C's, the 21st century skills, which are related to critical thinking, an expression of critical thinking in a way. The communication part is how you communicate your critical thinking. Are you able to arrange your speaking in logical ways, etc., which is also critical thinking. So 1, we will need to engage a little bit more in building logic. How does this work out? If we look at the way IT is taught in early years or up to primary school, and the curricula for those exist, if we look that up, that is all about building logic. It's about building logical wireframes, etc. That is a lead up to learning languages in class 11 and 12. Languages themselves will change later on. But if we are able to build logical learning using those tools and other toolkits available to us, if we are able to bring a sense of fun in our class using lateral puzzles, we have loads of those available to us. And if we are able to use, for example, the AAA technique, help our students understand the difference between what is an assumption, what is an argument, what is an assertion, we would have built a lot of critical thinking. That is definitely something the NEP demands of us teachers in the classroom. The second thing that they demand from us is that we build problem-solving skills so that our students can apply their knowledge. We have some beautiful techniques available for that. I'm sure, Maya, you will be running teacher training sessions on that. I'm going to take a sip of water here. We also have been asked not to ignore social and emotional skills. Again, Maya, you are the guru over here of social and emotional skills. But one thing we have to realize is the world has changed. Our world as teachers used to be the old 3C. We used to be focused on content, on curriculum, and on certification. That was our job. We receive content, we deliver our curriculum, we get them to the certification. That has changed now. Our job now is about building communities of learning. Our students will be learning together. Many of you will still be learning together in your school WhatsApp groups. Somebody has a question about the vaccine today. Some doctor in the group supplies another answer. We continue to grow and learn together. Learning is about communities. Learn is about care now. And the third is about maintaining connectivity, emotional and social connect. All our learning will happen at this point where social and emotional connection energizes something that gets embedded in us. That's the moment of learning. And regardless of what the content is, regardless of what the curriculum is, if we are able to teach our students that aha moment of learning, we would have done our job as teachers. And for that, whether it is STEM skills or whether it is history or whatever, we will be able to go through that 5-step process of getting to knowledge, applying it, being creative in our application, constructing something new that adds value to the world, and being able to enable functionality with care across the world. That is about quality standards in what we do, using these 4 techniques. I will stop here and pause here. I hope this has been useful, because that was just a summary of all the blues, slacks in the presentation, saying this is what we have to do. We have to be champions. We need a roadmap. We're being helped in the roadmap. We work to higher standards, and we work to purpose. And our purpose is building care and connect for that aha moment. so that our students can keep on learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Meeta. So I think we have some questions.
Wonderful.
I think Sandhya, have you sent some questions? Okay, I think Sandhya sent some questions. I've got a lot of questions because I couldn't see the questions when I was sharing screen. So I'm going to start with the first question that somebody asked quite early on, somebody by the name of Prashant. From a school leadership point of view, how will you ensure that the NEP 2020 will be effectively implemented? He feels that he's going to be asked that. How will you, as the school leader, implement NEP? So maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah. Now, implementing the entirety of the NEP is really too vast a task for anybody. And one thing we have as school leaders is a school improvement plan or a school improvement program. In fact, your board of governors should be implementing, or whosoever your support system, they will be asking you questions every year about how did you do better? Did you make more money, for example, if you happen to be in a commercial school? But they must also be asking questions about how did you do better for your students? How did your teachers improve? Your school improvement plan can select specific parts of the NEP, saying these are the goals that we choose. In fact, the last slide where I chose critical thinking, problem solving skills, STEM skills, and social and emotional learning, you can pick just those 4 areas. And you would have covered 80% of the NEPs asked in just those 4 goals that you set for yourself. So choose your goals based on your purpose. Why do you exist as a school? And you should be able to effectively deliver on improvement year on year.
Yeah. Another person has a comment, isn't STEAM more latest versus STEM? I think the arts part of it also.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it seems to be fashionable. STEAM is fashionable compared to STEM, but really it's not about fashion. If you only have STEM and you do not have an arts element to your STEM learning, the STEM learning proves to be quite ineffective. So I will give you a very simple example here. Just yesterday, I had to put my woolens up. The season is changing.
Yeah.
I realized that I'm growing older. Now, what I want is for my heaters and my suitcases to climb up on a hydraulic lift, which I can keep in the corner of my bedroom. Now, if I'm not an artist, how do I even have the visual skills, the creativity, imagine this new thing? STEM, hydraulics, engineering, load bearing, all of that is essential. But without arts, you cannot make improvements happen.
Yeah, that's right. There's another question here. I think NEP, would it be more of more work for teachers because of NEP, and because it's so much more, it calls upon so much more from the teacher?
It calls upon more from the teacher, but it's not really more work. In some ways, it is less work for teachers because it is about giving up control. It is about giving up the fear of, or giving up the need to police the classroom and saying, we are giving you, the class, certain norms that you need to adapt to. It's not always easy in every environment. You will have some disruptive groups. You will have some disruptive students. But this is why you have teacher training. This is why you have mentoring. So if you have a disruptive student or a disruptive group, ask for help because you can manage that. Your job as a teacher moves up the value chain to be the energizer, to inspire learning and to guide and nudge. So you are like the banks of a river that wants to go in every direction. But you're sort of saying, within these banks, I'm going to let you play with your learning. Which means you don't have to actually micromanage every bit. You can let go a little bit. You can be a little easier, a little friendlier, which is what we've actually discovered in our work from home year.
Exactly. That's right.
Some amount of letting go, some amount of letting the students say, hey, why don't you manage the technology? Oh, I can't do this. Can you help me with my screen sharing? There's no shame.
Yeah.
Sorry. Together. Hi, Isha.
Can we just mute? Yes. Yeah, there's no shame. I agree. There's another question here. Do you see the streams of ICSE, CBSE being at a disadvantage with the introduction of NEP? I'm not sure why whoever asked that question, felt that it would be at a disadvantage, ICSE and CBSE streams. But
I don't think so. In a way,
Yeah.
the NEP leads to almost integrating with the IB way of doing things without specifically going down the IB or the Montessori way. It has been
Yeah.
inspired by those. It leads up to those. But the ICSE and CBSE have their own specific advantages, and they specifically fit some students so much better.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
many parent needs so much better. So every board has its own reasons for being. And that is why we align and choose that board for our students.
Another question, what efforts are we making to prepare our teachers and facilitators to successfully implement NEP 2020?
Well, a lot of effort, and all of
Yeah.
us genuinely really care, because we understand that it is natural to feel lost at the beginning of the journey.
Yeah.
Because, for example, the new standards, they say new standards are coming, but the new standards are coming in 2022.
Yeah.
Sitting here in 2021, it's like all learners, it's a slightly vulnerable phase where we say we don't know what's coming. But really, once you read the NEP, you know what's coming. You know the question is going to change. You know applications are going
Yeah.
to become important. And
Yeah.
critical thinking is going to become important. For just these three things, if we begin to prepare ourselves, we will be ahead of everybody else, and we will find ourselves in a comfortable place.
Yeah. Another question that's come up, and I think this comes more from a urban setting and private school setting. Is it really possible for a teacher to teach in mother tongue for subjects in different places?
The mother tongue question is a tricky question, because I genuinely believe that the purpose of education is to give social and economic mobility to our students. That when they grow up, they should be able to manage in any social setting, however posh it is, and in any country they want to, let them go anywhere. For that, they need mobility, languages that are mobile.
Yeah.
But it is also true that the younger kids learn better. But our teachers are smarter than the NEP in this one. They're already ahead of the NEP in this one. Our practical teaching has always been multilingual. We have always been multilingual. We read in English, and in Hindi-speaking states like Delhi, where I stay, the teacher explains it in Hindi.
Yeah.
I've seen the same thing happening in Gujarati, in Marathi, etc. We're already learning multiple languages at the same time with the same textbooks. So the only thing the NEP has to do is give us better quality resources and
Yeah.
support us better in that.
Yeah.
The rest of the job we've already done. We're already multilingual.
That's correct. There are a couple of questions connected with early years. The foundational, will Montessori method be accepted? Is it sufficient, or should it be integrated? So that's a question that's come up.
Yeah, so the interesting thing, I think, is they're recognizing the fact that in class 1 and 2, the learning really used to be more about socializing children into how to work with each other rather than how to learn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the actual work used to be how to play with each other, how to share with each other. Children up to age 5 don't even know how to share. We just keep on forcing them to share and teach them a lot of that.
Yeah.
So it's about skilling up children, and this is where the Montessori way is a great inspiration. But I think schools are going to be allowed to go their own way,
That's
while an integrated 5-year role connectivity will be expected from them. So they will be expected to say, okay, this is how these 5 years connect with each other. Level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the first 5. To show us how you have created levels and progression. But continue to do their own thing.
Yeah. Oops. Sorry. Nita, are you there?
Yes.
Suddenly you got muted. I think, yeah. So there's another question here, and I think it's linked to a lot of the work that Vian is doing. Can we have a platform where teachers are updated or prepared for implementation on the NEP, of the NEP? I think that's something. It's still early days, I think, and I don't think the government is going to mandate it, But Meeta, what do you feel?
So I did say in pretty much the last slide that curation is something that they have not done very well. But well, that's what we are here for, right? We keep our efforts.
Exactly.
So stay tuned in, and we'll keep trying to do what we can to pull things together.
Yeah.
Just stay tuned.
Yeah. We're running out of time, but I think NEP calls upon teachers to rise up much beyond being just a subject teacher or just a primary teacher, to really look at improving and enhancing one's own mastery of the subject, about child, about learning processes, about the country, about the world, and so on. So there are, okay, could you tell us, there's another question, could you tell us where exactly in the MHRD website we can find the government rollout plan? We'll put that down, we'll send it to you all. We've got your email ID, so we will send it to you all. There's another question here. Do you think Diksha app needs a facelift?
All of them. So in IT space and startup space, there's something called an MVP, minimum viable product. I think we are still at minimum viable product,
possibly.
and there's a whole journey ahead of us.
Yeah.
Train your students better so that they go and do a better job over there. Next generation, we won't be struggling.
Yeah.
Your students who will actually see, the thing is, the students who built this and they grew up and built this, they had no sense of mastery, right?
That's
They
right.
were trained for marks. So when they make it, in our 3M thing, they were trained for marks. How they never saw mastery. You
That's
train
right.
them for mastery, the next generation teachers will have a much better Diksha app to work with. Show
There's
them what quality looks like.
There's one last question I'm going to ask you, and that's come from what can we expect as tangible changes other than the structure 5+3+3+4? Is there a danger of the youngest children being bogged down by curricular goals? I think you sort of touched upon it, but maybe it's worthwhile reiterating.
In fact, the fear is that we will not have enough bogging down. Many teachers are a little bit worried that there is too much freedom that has been advised and guided by the NEP. That is a fear. But to be honest, given the fact that the CBSE will be implementing it and these other exam boards will be implementing a lot of the changes, even down the line to middle school and early years, I think we can hope for a balance. But I also hope that given the age of social media, given the fact that we have so many wonderful platforms like this one, we are able to feed back so much better. That whenever we think, and this is where we have to step up as teachers as well, to just not be ensconced in our four walls of the classroom.
Yeah.
The four walls are broken away. And to step up and say, I think this is what is going to be good for everybody. So we want the NEP itself was a consultative document. Let's keep that spirit of consultation alive.
Yeah.
With maturity.
Yeah. I think there's a bit of a concern about some teachers who've done a 2-year BEd. Will that be still valid? It's not retro, it's prospective. So whatever NEP is talking about is looking ahead. So don't worry about that. And I think when are we going to start NEP? I think they said 2023 it should be rolling out because they give time. But Meeta, do you have anything to comment on? Because they're wondering, is it 2021, 2022, and so on?
So 2022 is when they announce the new teacher standards. That's an announcement. After an announcement, there's always some discussion before it is actually implemented in circular or rule form. But in a way, the implementation of the NEP has already started with, say, the National Testing Agency running the JEE exam. Some parts of it, the second version of the JEE, the second sitting of the JEE exam, that has already started. So in ways that can help students, especially during the pandemic, they're not saying we're going to wait because we should wait for 2-3 years. Let's just continue to do whatever good we can when we can. It's a very practical approach in a way.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we will have to stop here because time's running out. Thank you for lots of the other questions. We will respond to some of those questions because we've recorded this. So we'll have the questions on chat. So we will send you our responses. Thank you. And thank you so much, Meeta, for your very conversational explanation in your own unique way of deconstructing and helping all of us understand NEP Thank you, Meeta. Really warm gratitude from all of us at the Teacher Foundation, and of course, the larger audience of people who listen to you. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Harish to give the vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. We just have a quick announcement before we go for vote of thanks. So the Teacher Foundation will be offering the Headlamp course, Heads Leadership and Management Program for school heads and coordinators. This is our newly redesigned certificate course in contemporary school leadership, and it will be covered in 18 online sessions of 2 hours each over a duration of 4 to 6 months. We are starting a new batch on 26th of April. So whoever is interested, we request you to please provide your details using the interest form link that is shown on the screen, and we will also post the link on the chat. We request you to please note down the link or copy the link and provide us the details so that we will get back to you. On behalf of the Teacher Foundation, I would like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. We hope you had a great experience. I would also like to thank Ms. Meeta Sengupta for being part of this webinar and for sharing her valuable insights into NEP and answering our questions. And lastly, I would also like to thank the entire TTF team for making this webinar possible. Thank you all. We hope to see you again in our next webinar. Until then, bye-bye. Have a nice day. Thank you.